There is a number Microsoft does not want you to say out loud. Linux. And it is not the number of lawsuits. It is not the share price dip. It is not even the quarterly earnings miss. It is 240 million, because 240 million is the precise count of perfectly functional computers that Microsoft looked directly at, assessed with full corporate awareness, and then officially abandoned. And the moment that decision became real for ordinary people sitting in front of their machines, not a news headline, not a tech blogger's opinion, but the actual pop-up notification on their actual screen telling them their computer would no longer receive security updates. Something shifted in the relationship between Windows users and Microsoft that no amount of Copilot marketing, no amount of forced AI assistant integration, and no amount of rebranded start menus will ever fully repair. Because what Microsoft communicated in that single policy decision was not a software lifecycle announcement. It was a message, and the message was this: your loyalty for 20 years, your patience through Vista, your forgiveness after Windows 8, your tolerance of the telemetry creep and the advertising banners inside your own operating system, and the forced restarts that killed your work mid-sentence, none of that matters anymore, because your hardware does not have a TPM 2.0 chip, and therefore you are on your own. Now here is what Microsoft did not calculate. Now here's the variable that every internal model and every competitive analysis apparently failed to weight at sufficient magnitude. There was somewhere else to go, and for the first time in the 30-year history of the personal computing era, that somewhere else was genuinely, demonstrably, practically ready for the millions of people who were being pushed toward it. And the name of that somewhere else is Linux. And the story of how Linux went from the punchline of Bill Gates's most infamous corporate memo to the operating system that is now being downloaded by hundreds of thousands of former Windows users every single month is one of the most extraordinary reversals in the entire history of technology. And we are going to tell that story completely and honestly, starting from the moment Gates called it a cancer and ending with the moment the cure started looking more like the future than anything Microsoft has shipped in years. Let us go back to 2001, because the context matters here in a way that most tellings of this story skip past too quickly. In 2001, Bill Gates sent an internal memo in which he described the GNU GPL open source license, the legal framework that governs Linux, as a kind of intellectual property cancer. The argument being that because the GPL requires anyone who modifies and distributes GPL licensed software to release their modifications under the same license, it would spread through corporate software portfolios the way a cancer spreads through tissue, consuming proprietary code and making it free. And at the time, from inside the fortress of Windows dominance, with 95% desktop market share and a developer ecosystem so thoroughly dependent on Microsoft's platform that switching felt genuinely impossible for most businesses. This was not a paranoid overreaction. It was a strategically coherent, defensive posture from a man who understood, perhaps better than anyone alive at that moment, that the operating system layer was where value accumulated and where monopoly power compounded. And Linux represented the theoretical possibility that the operating system layer could belong to nobody, which from Gates's perspective was the same as saying it could belong to everyone, which in the economics of platform competition is the most dangerous scenario a monopolist can face because you cannot outprice free, you cannot outlicense free, and you cannot acquire free. But here's the thing about calling something a cancer in a memo that eventually leaks. It tells you exactly what the person writing it was afraid of, and what Gates was afraid of in 2001 was precisely what is now unfolding in 2025 and 2026, with an acceleration that the data documents in terms that leave very little room for reinterpretation. Zorin OS, one of the most popular Linux distributions specifically designed to ease the transition for Windows users with a familiar interface, announced in November 2025 that its latest release had been downloaded more than 1 million times in just 5 weeks. And when the developers examined their own telemetry data, they found that over 78%, nearly 800,000 of those 1 million downloads, came from Windows systems, meaning these were not longtime Linux enthusiasts upgrading between distributions. These were Windows users making the switch, crossing the threshold that the tech industry had spent 2 decades assuming was psychologically and practically uncrossable for mainstream computer owners who just wanted their machines to work without becoming system administrators. 1 million downloads in 5 weeks from a single distribution. And Zorin is not even the full picture, because Bazite, the Linux distribution built specifically for gaming, has been experiencing its own surge driven by a completely different population. The gamer demographic that Microsoft's competitive strategists had always cited as the strongest lock-in mechanism in the entire Windows ecosystem. The users who would tolerate every privacy intrusion and every forced update and every advertising experiment because leaving Windows meant leaving their game library. And for 20 years that calculation held because it was true. DirectX was Windows exclusive. Anti-cheat software was Windows dependent. And the gaming community's Linux adoption attempts were always eventually defeated by the one game they needed that would not run, the one title that was too important to sacrifice on the altar of operating system principle. And Microsoft knew this, and Microsoft counted on this, and Microsoft built an entire competitive moat on the foundation of it. Then Valve started quietly solving the problem that Microsoft assumed was permanent. The Proton compatibility layer, the DXVK translation framework, and the SteamPlay integration together created a system through which Windows games could run on Linux, not as a degraded experience, not as a compatibility hack that half worked on a good day, but as a genuinely playable, often technically superior experience. And the Steam Deck proved this to an audience of millions, not through a blog post or a benchmark, but through the most persuasive argument in technology. The thing you hold in your hands that does what you were told it could not do. When Linux gaming market share hit 5.33% on Steam in March 2026, that number represented not a rounding error, but a population of tens of millions of actual players, actual game hours, actual purchases, running on an operating system that DirectX was supposed to make permanently incompatible with the gaming lifestyle, and the speed with which that number has moved, from statistical noise to measurable market force, is a direct measurement of how quickly the gaming dependency that Microsoft relied on as its most durable. Retention mechanism dissolved once the technical problem was treated as a solvable engineering challenge rather than an acceptable permanent limitation. But let us return to the 240 million, because that is the number that accelerated everything, the number that turned Linux migration from a gradual philosophical drift into an urgent practical reality for a specific and enormous population of computer users simultaneously. When Microsoft ended support for Windows 10 in October 2025, the official justification was security. A lifecycle argument that old systems need to retire to maintain a healthy security posture for the ecosystem. And there is a version of that argument that is genuinely reasonable, because running unsupported software on a connected network does create real risk. And no technology company can support every version of its product forever without the support burden consuming the entire engineering capacity needed to build the future. The problem is not that Microsoft ended support for Windows 10. The problem is what Microsoft simultaneously refused to do, which was to allow the hundreds of millions of perfectly functional computers running Windows 10 to upgrade to Windows 11 without first acquiring hardware that many of them did not have and could not afford, specifically the TPM 2.0 security chip that Windows 11 requires as a baseline, a chip that was not standard equipment on computers manufactured before approximately 2017 and 2018, meaning that users with machines 5, 6, 7 years old, machines that run perfectly, machines that do everything their owners need them to do, machines that have no functional deficiency whatsoever, were told not that their software was old, but that their hardware was obsolete, that the price of continued security was not a free software upgrade, but a new computer purchase. And in an economic environment where that purchase represented a real hardship for many households, the options Microsoft presented were pay for extended security updates, accept running an unprotected system, or buy new hardware. And the option Microsoft did not put on the official list, but that millions of people discovered on their own, was install Linux, keep using the computer you already own, receive security updates indefinitely, pay nothing, and spend the money you would have spent on a Windows license or a new PC on something that actually matters to you. The distribution download servers began registering the migrations almost immediately after the October 2025 deadline, and they have not stopped. Global Linux desktop market share reached 4.7% in 2025, and analysts are projecting that it will cross double digits by the end of 2026. And before that number gets dismissed as still small relative to Windows, consider what the trajectory means, because Linux went from 2.76% in July 2022 to 4.7% by the end of 2025, a growth rate exceeding 70% in 3 years, and the force that drove the final phase of that acceleration, the Windows 10 end-of-life deadline and the hardware requirements wall, has not finished working its way through the 240 million affected devices, most of which are still sitting in people's homes and offices right now, running expired software, and every one of them is a potential Linux install, waiting for its owner to reach the frustration threshold. The enterprise dimension of this migration is the dimension the mainstream tech press covers least, but that matters most to Microsoft's long-term strategic position, because the enterprise customer is not making an emotional decision based on frustration with forced updates. The enterprise customer is making a financial calculation, a procurement analysis, a total cost of ownership comparison between the Microsoft licensing structure and the $0 Linux alternative, and Increasingly, that calculation is producing a result that Microsoft's licensing department finds uncomfortable to acknowledge. Germany is the example that keeps appearing in this conversation for good reason, because Germany's public sector Linux deployment has moved past the pilot stage, past the experiment stage, past the carefully hedged trial into something that looks like a genuine institutional commitment to platform independence. And the motivation is not purely financial. It is also sovereignty, the concern that critical government infrastructure running on a proprietary American operating system represents a strategic dependency that European regulators and European security agencies have been raising with increasing urgency in the years since data sovereignty became a compliance category with actual legal teeth. The European General Data Protection Regulation created a legal framework in which the question of what data an operating system collects about government employees on government computers is not a privacy preference but a compliance obligation. And the answer that Windows 11 provides to that question, through its telemetry architecture, through its Copilot data processing, through its behavioral analytics infrastructure that feeds the advertising and AI training pipelines, is an answer that GDPR compliance officers are increasingly reading as a legal exposure rather than an acceptable operating condition, and the architectural response to that exposure is not a configuration change, is not a group policy setting, it's not a Microsoft promise to process data differently. It is an operating system whose source code can be read, whose data collection can be verified as absent rather than configured as suppressed, and whose development is governed by a community rather than a corporation, whose business model is built on understanding everything its users do. The privacy argument for Linux in the enterprise is not ideological anymore. It is legal. It is audit-driven. It is the compliance department's recommendation in jurisdictions where Windows telemetry's legal status has moved from ambiguous to scrutinized. And this reality exists alongside the financial argument, alongside the sovereignty argument, alongside the hardware lifecycle extension argument. And together, these arguments are building an enterprise migration business case that no amount of Microsoft sales, relationship management, and volume licensing flexibility is proving sufficient to universally counter in the way it once could. But the human story beneath the statistics is the story that no spreadsheet captures. And it is the story of a relationship that broke. And how relationships between users and platforms break is something the technology industry has never been particularly honest about, because the industry narrative prefers the triumphant product launch to the story of accumulated grievance, prefers the feature announcement to the account of what it felt like to watch advertising appear inside the file explorer of an operating system you purchased, prefers the AI integration roadmap to the description of what it was like to be in the middle of a work deadline when Windows decided autonomously that this was the moment for a mandatory update requiring a restart, your unsaved work and your professional credibility to be negotiated later, after the reboot completed, and the new terms of service agreement asked for your acknowledgement before allowing you to resume existing in your own computer. These were not isolated incidents. These were not edge cases that affected unusual configurations. These were the daily operating conditions of the Windows experience for hundreds of millions of people across years, and each incident added a unit of accumulated grievance to a running total that Microsoft's product decisions were simultaneously inflating and ignoring, sustained only by the switching cost calculation that said the pain of leaving was greater than the pain of staying, and that calculation remained true right up to the moment it stopped being true. And the moment it stopped being true was the moment that a person who had never typed a command in a terminal in their life watched a YouTube video of someone installing Ubuntu, or Zorin OS on a computer that looked exactly like theirs, followed the steps, and discovered on the other side of a 30-minute installation that the computer they thought was dead was alive, that it ran faster than it had in years, that there were no ads, that there were no telemetry agreements to click through, that the updates happened quietly. It did not interrupt anything, that the free Office software opened their old Word documents without complaint, that the operating system asked nothing of them except to use it, and that nobody owned it, and nobody was selling them anything, and nobody was watching what they did with it. That experience, repeated across hundreds of thousands of households in the months following October 2025, is what the statistics are actually measuring. Not a political statement about open source philosophy, not a technical preference among sophisticated users, a person who just wanted their computer to work discovering that it did, and for free, and without the relationship dynamics that had made using a computer feel increasingly like a negotiation with a corporation whose interests were not aligned with theirs. The gaming community's experience of the same discovery happened through different channels, but arrived at the same emotional place, and the Steam Deck was the device that made the argument concrete for a population that had spent years being told the argument was theoretical. When Valve shipped the Steam Deck in 2022 running Steam OS, a Linux-based operating system, and the device played the Windows, Gaming library through Proton without the compatibility apocalypse that everyone had been promised was inevitable. It did not just prove a technical point. It dissolved an assumption that had been load-bearing architecture in Microsoft's competitive position for 20 years. The assumption that gaming required Windows was not simply a marketing claim. It was woven into every DirectX investment decision, every Games for Windows Live misadventure, every Xbox ecosystem integration strategy, every argument made by every IT administrator who resisted Linux adoption. In gaming organizations, by pointing at the game compatibility list and saying, "Not yet." Not yet became suddenly and without much announcement, and now Linux gaming market share is growing faster than any other category on Steam, and the software vendors who built their products on Windows kernel dependencies are being pushed by their publisher clients to find architecture-neutral solutions, because the market they are leaving money on by excluding Linux has grown large enough to show up in a revenue discussion. The compounding effect of all of these forces, the hardware requirements, wall, the Windows, 10, abandonment, the gaming compatibility breakthrough, the enterprise privacy calculation, the accumulated user grievance, is producing a migration whose momentum has a quality that previous Linux growth cycles lacked, which is the quality of self-reinforcement. When enough users migrate to a platform, developers follow the users. When developers follow the users, application quality improves. When application quality improves, the remaining barriers to migration lower. When barriers lower, more users migrate. This is the network effect, operating in Linux's favor for the first time in desktop computing history, and the Linux community's infrastructure. The form networks, the documentation libraries, the distribution, maintainers, the hardware driver contributors, is scaling to receive the incoming population in a way that makes the experience of arriving on Linux in 2025 and 2026 qualitatively different from the experience of arriving in 2015 or 2010, when the documentation assumed technical sophistication and the community, though welcoming, was small enough that finding help for a specific hardware problem could take days rather than minutes. The infrastructure for mass adoption is now present. The user experience has matured past the threshold that mainstream adoption requires. The migration trigger that previous Linux advocates had been waiting for has arrived in the form of 240 million abandoned computers and a TPM 2.0 requirement that the people who write the Microsoft licensing agreements appear not to have fully wargamed against the question of where the excluded users would go. Where they are going is documented. Where they are going is accelerating. And the man who called Linux a cancer is watching from a position of considerable wealth and historical achievement, watching the thing he dismissed transform into the thing that is dismantling the assumption his empire was built on, the assumption that the switching cost was always too high, the barrier always too strong, the alternative always almost but never quite ready. The almost is gone. The readiness is here. And the number of people who have decided they deserve a computer that belongs to them rather than to the corporation that sold it to them is growing, quietly, every single day, one migration at a time, one distribution download at a time, one person at a time, discovering that the cancer Bill Gates feared was not the destruction of value. It was the creation of it, and it was always going to win, because the thing that belongs to everyone is, in the end, more powerful than the thing that belongs to one company. And the story of Microsoft's Windows monopoly is becoming, in real time, the proof of that principle. The exodus is here. The data confirms it. The servers are counting it. And the only remaining question is not whether Linux has won the argument, it has, but how many more of those 240 million computers will be running it by the time this moment is recognized in the mainstream technology press as the inflection point that it already is.